Today, iconic British-American screen and stage star Olivia de Havilland is remembered not only for her work in classic films such as Captain Blood, The Adventures of Robin Hood, and Gone with the Wind, but also for her pioneering work in starting to break up the old Hollywood studio contract system. Often compared by many to a state of indentured servitude, the standard Hollywood star contracts that were prevalent from the 1920s to the 40s saw actors tied to one studio for a specific set of time, usually many years, and employed at a flat rate across those years, required to appear in any and in as many movies as the studio decided. Unfortunately, this left many actors feeling typecast, as their home studios simply kept plugging them into the same sort of roles over and over. This was the case with de Havilland, who, while under a 7-year contract with Warner Brothers, grew tired of the damsel in distress roles she was continuously given, ultimately refusing to do a number of roles, which earned her a 6-month suspension. But when her 7 years were up, she was informed Warner Brothers was adding those 6 months back onto her contract to make up for the work they felt they had lost from her. De Havilland fought back, taking the fight to the courts and ultimately winning, with the courts ruling that studios had to honor the lengths of time originally stated in contracts. Although the victory didn't completely demolish the star contract system, it was a crucial first step in giving actors more personal freedom over their choices and career, and in the following years, Hollywood would largely move away from multi-year contracts that don't allow freedom in choosing specific projects. And yet, while the indentured servant contract system is generally considered to be a thing of the past in Hollywood, that doesn't mean that in more recent years there haven't still been examples of performers being forced, in a manner of speaking, to participate in particular films they did not choose themselves. In the mid-90s, Geena Davis agreed to co-star with Michael Douglas in the big-budget pirate epic Cutthroat Island. But when Douglas dropped out, Davis tried to as well, only to be held to her contract for the film, which ended up being a big gigantic box office disaster that Davis blames to this day for derailing her then successful career. Two of the biggest hits of Bruce Willis's career, Armageddon and The Sixth Sense, only star Willis because he was forced to sign a reduced salary multi-picture deal with Disney rather than face a costly lawsuit after his bad on-set behavior caused an earlier Disney project called Broadway Brawler to be shut down. Channing Tatum only starred in G.I. Joe: The Rise of Cobra because Paramount pressured him to do so as part of a 3-picture deal he had with the studio, though they were at least kind enough to honor his request to be quickly killed off in the sequel. And Emily Blunt was forced to step away from the role of Black Widow in Iron Man 2, after Fox instead decided to exercise a 4-year-old option for another movie from her Devil Wears Prada contract, forcing her to appear in the Jack Black misfire Gulliver's Travels instead of playing the beloved iconic Avengers character. But, oddly enough, another of the Avengers cast, Mark Ruffalo, only appeared as the Hulk in 2012's The Avengers because he was replacing another actor who had previously played the part, and was interested in doing so again. But Disney and Marvel had decided to move on without him. Accounts vary as to why this was, but it's important to note the actor in question already had a reputation of being difficult to work with. And in fact, that reputation was at least partly born out of previous circumstances in the early 2000s that had led him to being forced to appear in a movie he had no interest in, one he would even suggest his fans avoid seeing. Despite this, the movie was still a financial hit, but today, even as he feels disappointment he was never able to reprise his role as the Hulk, perhaps he takes some solace that the earlier movie he was forced into never got its sequel, and he was spared a return role he didn't want. The year is 2003, and Paramount Pictures are ready to remake a beloved 60s British crime caper, and in the process hopefully launch the next big heist movie action franchise with The Italian Job.
10, Welcome once again to Failure to Franchise, the show dedicated to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And I'm Chris. Feeling exactly how I do before every recording. Fine.
You know, I should let me backtrack a little bit. Actually, I should say that for this episode, and this episode only, because I'm a humble man, I'm going to adopt the name Handsome Trev.
Yes. Actually, I'm staring at the recording that we do on Clean Feed, and Trev entered the program that we used to record under the pseudonym Handsome Trev.
Yes.
It's very apt. I have met you in person many times. Well, maybe not many times actually, which is weird to say. I think we've we've met.
More like 4 times maybe.
Yeah, isn't that weird to say? Like, we have a decade-long friendship, but we've met face-to-face
Yeah.
a handful. Is that wild?
We don't even do, like, when we do the record of these, we're not looking at each other. We have our cameras off for bandwidth. And
thank God.
So I know. No, but and it's not just not just me being humble or anything. There's a very particular reason I chose that nickname this time, and that relates to our movie. We are just cruising along here. Some might say we hopped in our little Mini Coopers and we're just chugging along in episode 2 of our 4-episode series, Mark Wahlturd and the Yucky Bunch, continuing our look at failed Mark Wahlberg franchise starters. Last time we looked at 2001's Planet of the Apes. I think we both barely survived that. Our longest episode ever about a movie that is like very, very miserable to talk about.
Yeah.
And now here we are just a couple years later, not too far, with 2003's The Italian Job. Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about this one?
For sure. It is directed by F. Gary Gray. He directed Friday, The Negotiator, A Man Apart. At this type in this time of his career, he did a lot of hip hop music videos. Ice Cube, Dr. Dre, Usher, your favorite artist R. Kelly. This is
It's not so much as music. It's not so much as music I like. It's just like it's what he stands for. Yeah.
We don't even have to say allegedly. That's a nice.
No, we
that's
don't.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. There might be a joke later that we can also not say allegedly. Okay. We'll get to it.
Yeah.
I'll call it.
And even speaking of like car movies, not to cut you off too much, but he went on to direct one of the Fast and the Furious movies as well, right?
Yes, and shares some cast members. So we'll get to that.
Yeah.
We'll get to that, how he ruined the Fast franchise. Okay. This is based on the original 1969 film written by Troy Kennedy Martin, but this incarnation of the film was written by Donna and Wayne Powers. They wrote your other favorite movie, Deep Blue Sea, and I hope they in the realm of hip hop music videos, I really wish F. Gary Gray directed My Hand Is Like a Shark's Fin by the great LL Cool J.
The greatest movie tie-in songs of all time.
So good.
Yeah. Why hasn't Diane Warren won an Oscar yet? Because she's never written anything as good as like Shark's Fin for a movie. That's why.
Okay, this the budget of The Italian Job, $60 million. Domestically, it made $106 million, and worldwide, a pretty big hit financially and culturally. $176 million. I also wanted to put an asterisk here too to give a little bit more financials. This is during the time where DVD home video sales really added a lot of money to your your overarching gross, I guess. But on top of $176 million, this movie made almost $60 million in video sales. They sold over 3.28 million copies of this DVD. So quite a financial stunner, honestly.
And for whatever it's worth, I will also say that this is also the days before the death and collapse of linear cable TV. And I remember this being kind of a perennial mainstay on cable for a while after too. So it went through the whole run of theatrical and video, and then I just remember being on the movie channels like all the time back then. Yeah.
Yeah, made tons of money. So what the hell? Why didn't they make that sequel?
Yeah. And we'll talk about that. You mentioned it being culturally relevant. Can we just maybe get into that right now, right off the bat? Just because I want to ask you a question, Chris, because I'm guessing when you say it's culturally relevant, we'll get into the whole background and everything, but just as a little peek into what people might remember for this movie, is this movie definitely started a little like resurgence of the Mini Cooper as a popular car. And I wanted to ask you, did Canada also, did you guys have the Mini Cooper boom following this movie? Because I remember after this came out, suddenly you definitely saw a lot more Mini Coopers on the road, and it was at this time I think it was like BMW actually released a new kind of updated, modified version of the Mini Cooper, and I believe this movie sent their sales up like 22% or something. And I definitely remember like, oh my God, just suddenly you saw them all over the place. Did Canada get that as well?
Definitely a little bit. For sure. I mean, we have far less population, so it's less, we have kind of the 10th of your population. So it wasn't as noticeable, but this is the Mini Cooper movie. So as soon as you saw that car on the street or even a commercial for it, you thought about The Italian Job. And then when you thought about The Italian Job, you thought about that car. So that's 100% the cultural impact of this movie. Like, not only do people still reference it as a, you know, seminal heist film from the early aughts, early 2000s. Sorry, the car. That's the way. They made like 32 of these things too during the making of it. So, yeah, it's pretty cool. They're a pretty cool car, honestly. Like I actually quite like that car. Not that you know, no free plugs, But you don't think so?
I think they're cool for the purposes of this kind of movie, and we'll talk about that when we talk about the movie. And I don't really find them to be that cool, like in person. And to me, when I look at them, they look like, you know, those toy cars you'd get when you were a kid, where you put them on the table and you pull them back and let go. And these like, that's what the Mini Cooper looks like. It looks like you'd get in it, and then you'd have to have some friends push it backwards for about, you know, like 100 feet, and then let go, and maybe you're good to get to like the grocery store.
I would say like of the three kind of small type hatchback cars that I'm going to reference here, this is the best one. The worst one being the smart car. That thing's junk. And then the second one, I hate the PT Cruiser.
The PT Cruiser is maybe the ugliest car ever. Like that's
of all time. Horrible. Yeah. But the Mini Cooper was just like, there was something cool about it. And honest to God, it has to be this movie. It really has to be.
It does look like a little death trap too, you know, but
yeah.
But who knows? Because sometimes they say, like, you know, it's worse to be in a big car in an accident, and that's why, you know, the older cars are actually more dangerous. But whatever, We're getting ahead of ourselves. I just wanted to ask that question and kind of give a peek ahead and say this is the Mini Cooper movie. But Chris, before we go any further, I'm actually going to derail us just for a second, because I have we don't do this too often, but when it's necessary, it's necessary. I have a corrections corner from our last episode.
Okay. Me or you?
Well, both of us, actually. One is just on me, and one is on both of us.
Okay.
The one just on me, I just want to point out, we were talking about when we were going through all the different Planet of the Apes movies that didn't happen, and we were like kind of bemoaning the fact that we didn't get the James Cameron, Arnold Schwarzenegger Planet of the Apes movie. I said that Cameron and Schwarzenegger were also planning to do a medieval epic. I was actually thinking of The Crusades with Schwarzenegger, which is going to be directed by Paul Verhoeven. So sorry that I confused my awesome directors. And then on both of us,
the nerdiest deep cut correction corner for you and the one other listener.
This is kind of shameful, but this one's on both of us. I believe we both made the mistake of saying that Roddy McDowall was in all of the original Planet of the Apes movies, but he is, of course, not in Battle for the Planet of the Apes, as some of my friends point out to me. In my defense, that movie sucks. So, I mean, I like it, but it sucks, and that's why I forgot that Roddy McDowall wasn't in it. So I just wanted to make sure we got that out of the way before.
We'll take that one on the chin, okay?
Yeah,
we
will.
That's fine.
But I bring that up to promise we will make absolutely no mistakes during our Italian Job episode. Zero. Everything we say, you can take to the bank for this episode.
Yeah. The research we put in to these podcasts, at least 25 to 35 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Right,
hey,
okay.
But you know, speaking of research, and maybe this is a good place to start. I did my typical Trevor shit that you usually do not come along with me on. I did go back and watch the original 1969 The Italian Job for this, which I had never seen. Didn't like it.
It's funny that you always do a little bit of homework, right? Like typically speaking, you do. It's usually for the worse for your time. I wanted to jump into say that I did my homework as well. Last episode, you said you should watch The Big Hit. And I said to the listeners, I said, hey, you know, give me credit. I usually do get to these pretty quickly. And guess what? In between the two recordings we're doing, I watched The Big Hit and I liked it. And I realized that you have told me to watch this now a few times, and it's documented in one of the podcasts we did.
So that's okay.
Anyway,
you know, it makes sense that it would take like the Wahlberg kind of focus to get to it. But I'm definitely glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad you had a better time with it than I did with the original Italian Job.
Yeah. So why did that one suck? I've never seen it, so I don't, and I'm not going to watch it. I don't believe in movies before '93. So
yeah, I know. Let me put an important caveat here and say I'm not saying it sucked. I just think it really was. I wrote this in my Letterboxd review too. I really think it was kind of a you had to be there at the time kind of thing with this movie. I'm all for, like, first of all, hey, look, I love Michael Caine. I love young Michael Caine. The dude's a snack, obviously, right? He's very, very charming. I like heist movies. We'll talk about that in a bit. And I like 60s British camp, you know? So it seemed like everything was, it seemed like it should be right up my alley. I think it committed a heist movie sin for me of it's like the entire first hour is the planning of the heist, and it's like a really big crew. Okay, it's like a much bigger crew than we get in this remake. But the problem is it's kind of all just like so exposition driven and a bunch of like little vignette bits that you don't get to know anybody on the crew except for Michael Caine. There are like members of the crew who by the time the heist is pulled off, you still only really know them as like putting a name to a face. And honestly, there were so many that even that I couldn't, by the time I got to the heist, I was like, I think that one's Dave and like that one's Bill. Like it's like I think you need to like let us know every member of the crew, you know? The final like half hour is the heist, and it's a big car chase scene, and there are some really good bits in that. Obviously, that's probably what's remembered, and it's actually interesting that the movie ends on a cliffhanger, a literal cliffhanger, with them all on a bus that's hanging off the cliff, and the gold that they just stole is like they're doing like the counterweight thing where the gold is like weighing down one side of the bus and they're weighing down the other side, and they're trying to figure out what to do, and the movie just ends like that, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. So there were things I liked about it, but for the most part, the humor wasn't really hitting for me, and yeah, I just think it really wasted a lot of time in the first hour not like introducing the characters. There's also there's this like really annoying song called like the Self-Preservation Society. I beg you at some point to go listen to it, even if you're not going to watch the movie, and just think about how that song is played over what are supposed to be like exciting action scenes. So yeah, I just think it wasn't for me, but I know it's like a huge like British cult hit, like, and it's remained like super culturally relevant over there. And doing the research for this, I read about how there's even like a charity event in Britain called like the Italian Job that they do every year, and it's just like a very, very beloved movie, very, very beloved part of like Michael Caine's early filmography. It just didn't hit for me. It's funny that I even bothered to go back and watch it, since I did read that this remake is kind of just an in-name only remake, you know?
Yeah.
But
an
I still
homage, an homage, as Graham likes to say.
The three Mini Coopers, the red, white, and blue Mini Coopers, and stealing a bunch of gold. That's kind of really it. And then other than that, there's not too much similar. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you watched it. You know, I'm always in awe of the work you do for me, and then I can just get a 3-minute review.
That's all you need.
That's it. But I will say this is a nice segue into why we like these kinds of movies, because you've already named certain things that I think are a must in a heist film, right? And that's what the Italian Job is, right? Like, these are heist films, and I wrote a couple things, so I'm gonna throw them at you, and let's discuss kind of point by point. Is that cool?
Yeah, for sure. And like before we can go into that, like I think we know the answer to this, and I know the answer for you, but where do you like kind of rank heist movies in like in terms of your favorite types of movies? Is it pretty high? Like, are you always down for a good heist movie, or?
Always.
Yeah,
like always. I mean, and it's a fun genre because it can be a subgenre, right? You can throw a heist movie in a superhero film. You can throw it in a gladiator type movie. You can throw it in any type of way.
A horror film. A heist can suddenly become a horror film.
100%. It's a very malleable genre and plot device. So yeah, heist films are just always fun. They're usually really well put together. So
yeah, they kind of go hand in hand with another genre that I know we've talked about, and another favorite of mine is just men on a mission movies. Right?
Yes.
You give me a good ensemble cast together as a crew going on a mission or a heist, where the case might be, and I'm usually a happy guy. It's very dependable.
So these are the kind of point by point things that I like in a heist movie. That one that's going to hit for me should have really every single part of this. Okay, so let me throw you the first one. Charismatic characters, but with history that we are seeing and hearing and everything to really show that they have camaraderie. Like I need to see it. I don't just need to hear it. And I'm going to reference a piece of shit movie that we talked about on this movie, or on this podcast, called Mutant Chronicles. Okay, that was a man on a mission movie where it was complete lip service and it just did not work. So I need to see a group of charismatic characters, join in on their reindeer games. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the best heist movies are the ones where we're not watching the crew's first heist, right? At least a good portion of the crew. This is like they've been doing it together for years, and they've worked up a whole like inner language and inside jokes and shorthand, and totally. We get to come into that and like be and not as get it through exposition, but instead get it through watching them do a heist.
I love that you just said we shouldn't see them on their first heist. However, I will say a great heist movie starts with a heist right away.
Yeah.
You know, kind of an opening credits, pre-title title screen heist to really introduce those players that I was talking about, show their roles, show their characteristics with each other. But yeah, we definitely need a heist that is starting the film, and then maybe something that goes wrong that really is the ignition point for the real plot of the movie. I love that. Love that. Obviously, you got to have intricate planning montages. You know, I gotta see these guys test out the plan. You know, again, not just talking about it. I gotta see, like we'll talk about it in this movie, but you know, if they're talking about wheeling and dealing cars, you know, going around the street or whatnot, they're going to have to test out the capabilities of said car. I want to see that first. I want to see them, you know, hit the side of the wall and get better. You know what I mean?
Well, the planning is important too, because when we get to the actual heist in the second half or last act of the movie, we don't want them constantly explaining what they're doing during the heist. But we want to just be able to watch them do it. But by this point, we should understand every element because we've seen the planning, except for the elements that the movie is cleverly keeping from us, which is also, you know, sometimes a key element.
Which brings me to my absolute favorite heists, is when the plan that we've been watching, like the planning stages, the montages, everything, when they get to do said heist, plan A goes screwy, right? Yeah. So they have to adapt and then forced to do a plan B or C. Now, the best part about this is when it's revealed later on that plan B or C was always a part of plan A. Right. Fucking love that. Love that.
Yeah, you could take it too far in the case of maybe like an Ocean's 12, but which I know has been reclaimed by a lot of people. I'm still not super hot on it, same here. But no, but I generally love that too. And like the whole idea of the movie, just for dramatic purposes, obviously is going to be much better if elements of the heist go awry. To stay in like the discussion of the Ocean's series, I don't know, Chris, if you ever got around to seeing Ocean's 8. I know we might do it on this show someday, so I won't say too much, but I believe I've already told you that like one of my problems with that movie is it just feels like nothing goes wrong with the heist. We just watch them plan a heist and then we watch them execute it. And I was like, I kept waiting. Well, okay, what's the obstacle? Where does something go wrong? And it's just like, no. We're just going to watch these professionals do their job. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, what's the drama then? You know?
Yeah, that's just super boring. I need to see heists they take a pro planner, right? You usually have somebody in the group that's like planning the whole thing and being the Dominic Toretto. You know, in this case, we'll talk about it, the Mark Wahlberg, Charlie Croker character. You know,
Danny Ocean,
totally. You got to see a guy that's so capable of putting stuff together that when shit hits the fan, it's their time to shine as the leader to adapt. So if you don't have that element, I completely agree. Just the excitement is, null and void, really. It just becomes, it's like going to work.
Yeah.
It's like now I'm watching a movie about a 9 to 5.
Yeah. We might as well have time cards,
Totally. And then, the editing in a heist film has to be really pitch perfect. It's the pacing and reveals to a heist movie are really reliant on visual language. I don't want to be told all the time. I need to show, not tell in a heist movie. So editing, me and you both, we are, of course, as I think if you are a big film lover, like editing is very, very important. But it is something that I treasure even just in my hobby and personal life, that editing will really make or break a film. You could have the absolute best filmmaker on the planet, like Scorsese, but if you don't have, his what was his long-term editor?
Thelma Schumacher.
She is,
Schoonmaker.
Schoonmaker. Yeah. She is, hand in hand why his movies are so successful. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, the best heist movies are usually ones, as we've already been alluding to, are ones that have an entire crew. But even if it's a heist movie of like one person, like, we looked at the Thomas Crown Affair, we looked at the remake. But even this is true of the original and the remake, is even if it's a singular person pulling off the heist, there should be many elements of the heist happening at one time. So it kind of does become this editing masterclass where you're cutting, if it's a crew, you're cutting between each member doing their thing. And it's very, very important that these elements are, done at a very particular time in the heist. So the editing becomes very key, and it becomes an opportunity, as you just said, to be very stylized with the editing as well. well. Split screens and kind of time reversals and flashbacks in the moment. All that stuff is adds to the excitement of watching a good heist pulled off on film.
I know you had texted me before being like, we should rattle off a few of our favorite heist films. And I think right off the bat we're probably going to name the exact same one as like kind of the king of the heist films. And you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I think almost every single, especially modern heist film owes so much, almost entirely to Heat. Yeah. I think that is the benchmark.
There's kind of like two kinds of like heist movies, I think, in my head, and Heat is like, to me, like the masterpiece of the very serious heist movie and like the very, very technical heist movie. And then there's like the swinging cool heist movie, right? And then of course the masterpiece is Ocean's 11, right? And not the original. The original is boring as hell. But Steven Soderbergh's
it's the Italian Job 1969.
It really is, movies. Yeah. Oh, that's and actually like the original Thomas Crown Affair I wasn't super into either.
Totally.
So these remakes came along. But the 2001 Ocean's 11 to me is a 5-star like perfect movie. I just think it just like that's a movie that just like oozes cool, right? Like the great ensemble cast, as we just said, every character is memorable. Every character is immediately identifiable. It's like not only like what their job is in the crew, but what their personality is. And everything we just talked about is done so well, like the crazy editing and the reveals and the, oh my god, the movie pulled a trick on me, oh my god, Danny Ocean was pulling a fast one on me, not just the villain. Like all that stuff is just done so well.
And I think somebody like Christopher Nolan, with even aspects of The Dark Knight or of course Inception.
Well, I had like when I said we should talk about some of our favorite heist movies, like I think of Inception as like one of my favorite heist movies because that's it's more obviously sci-fi in nature, but it's still a great heist movie too. Oh, yeah.
I even throw down The Town, Ben Affleck's The Town.
Town is awesome.
Love The Town. I threw down Fast Five. Fast Five. I know you're not as hot on Fast Five as a lot of people are, but Fast Five to me was like the Fast franchise I love unironically. I actually do love that franchise up until, F. Gary Gray's, 8th entry. But Fast Five, I felt, took the franchise into, a new gear, for in need of a pun. But the Fast Five reveals of the heist just hit so hard in 2011 when I saw that with the safes and the switcheroos, and then it goes back in time to show you exactly where they made the switch under the bridge, and it's very Ocean's 11, of course. It is taking that Ocean's 11 stylization, but man, Fast Five, love Fast Five.
The two other ones I wanted to start really quickly. I mean, there's a bunch, right? But we don't want to derail this too much. But two others that I definitely wanted to shout out as like a couple of my favorites are Michael Mann's Thief from 1981 with James Caan. Just a great like early Michael Mann, amazing performance from James Caan. And then Ronin from 1998. With the John Frankenheimer movie with Robert De Niro, which, we talk about like car chases being an element of some of these. Like Ronin has one of the all-time great car chases as well. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So we like the genre.
We do, yeah.
Good.
But hey, you know what? We also like Planet of the Apes movies, so it doesn't necessarily mean that it's just it's a given. So.
Good point. Very, very, very good point. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, in saying that, let's turn our attention to Mark Wahlberg, the man of the hour, and then leading into a little bit of behind the scenes of this film. There's not a lot to go over, not nearly as much like we did with Planet of the Apes. That was a lot of fun, don't get me wrong, but this one I think we'll get to the movie proper pretty quickly. But Mark Wahlberg at this time is coming off of Planet of the Apes.
He's coming out. Actually, he's like this. The Italian Job's Mark Wahlberg is a man in need of a hit.
Yes,
because it's easy. Like Planet of the Apes is definitely still the albatross around his neck at this point. It's still probably what everyone's thinking of, but it's also important to remember that he follows Planet of the Apes with two other flops. In 2001, he also has Rockstar, the movie where he plays like the singer of like a cover band that gets a chance to actually be the singer for the real band. Also a critical and financial flop. It just gets overshadowed that year by how much more people, which is funny, it gets overshadowed by this financially successful Planet of the Apes, but everyone hates that movie so much. It's like what people remember more. And then he probably very unwisely decides to do a remake of Charade the next year with, Thandie Newton. How do you pronounce her?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Tandway,
yeah.
I don't know. Sorry.
Yeah, they do The Truth About Charlie, their remake of Charade, and that is like a real big black eye. Like nobody likes that movie. It really flops. I think I have it up here. Okay, it cost $60 million to make. It made $7.1 million. Oh my god! So, yeah,
I'm looking right now. The IMDb rating is 4.7, which is very, very low for IMDb.
I will say maybe it's like some like misunderstood masterpiece. I never bother with it. I didn't really think, call me crazy, but I was like, you know what? I don't think Mark Wahlberg and Thandaway Newton are like going to upstage Cary Grant and Audrey Hepburn from Charade. I don't think when I think Cary Grant and replacements, I don't think Mark Wahlberg. So it just seemed like that just seemed very, very misthought as well. So he had like three, like as we said, Planet of the Apes was a financial hit, but it kind of, people knew right away that it wasn't gonna get a sequel, and it was like not very well regarded.
And he was bad in it.
And he was bad in it, yeah. And then he followed that with two just undeniable flops. So he was flailing a little bit at this point.
So I got to cut in here because I have a theory why he signed on to this one so quickly. And so one thing is this time, we've already mentioned a couple of of titles, Thomas Crown Affair, Ocean's 11. There's kind of like this resurgence, revival of heist films right now around this time.
Yeah, they were like, oh my god, find every 60s heist movie we can get and make a remake of it.
Exactly. And listeners, if you remember back to the Planet of the Apes episode, Mark Wahlberg actually drops out of Ocean's 11. So he drops out of that movie to make Planet of the Apes. Now, I have a theory that he signed on to this immediately because he was filled with regret, and was like, "Oh my god, I probably should have taken that heist film."
Yeah.
What would you say to that?
I think that makes sense. I think that's a good theory. I won't dismiss it. I think there's like another element to it too, and I've never heard him talk about this, but in our last episode when we went through like kind of the more early days of Wahlberg's career, so go back and listen to that one for his whole origin story or whatever.
Sure.
But we talked about how he was never like really planning to be an actor initially. He was more of a musician. He was plucked into the acting world, and it even just seemed like he was a little like hesitant about acting, and then started to kind of like get his feet under him and get a little bit more interested in it. And we thought, we said like he wanted to work with Tim Burton, so it showed he did have some kind of sense of, well, I should work with good directors, right? Because good directors will probably get me in good movies and I'll get better roles. But you think about the fact that he does Planet of the Apes, which is a remake, and then he does The Truth About Charlie, which is a remake, and then he does The Italian Job, which is a remake. And I kind of feel like because we discussed how Planet of the Apes was his first big shot at like leading man Hollywood blockbuster guy, and it doesn't work. I think that Mark Wahlberg at this time was trying to figure out what his place in Hollywood was, and his mentality of that was like, I'm going to try to like emulate different stars of the past, right? So I'm going to try, could I be the new Charlton Heston? No, that didn't work. Okay, can I be Cary Grant? Ooh, definitely not, right? Well, what about Michael Caine, right? It just seems like he was choosing these movies that allowed him to trade in on the same stories and archetypes of like these classic leading men of the past and see if he could find his way in there. So I think that's probably part of it too.
I like that theory. I like that. Because like you were saying, this is a star on the rise in the making, really trying to find himself, and to see where, if one of these hits, we can make a bunch of these.
And that is important, right? Because he had some early success early on, but in like, with like stuff like Basketball Diaries and Boogie Nights, but you're not going to make like 100 movies like Boogie Nights, right?
No.
So it really is a matter of like, okay, when I'm the above the title name, what is my on-screen persona? And there are certain actors who can do a lot, can do like a variation of that, and then there are certain actors who, very much. And look, in this movie, we haven't said it yet, but Jason Statham's in this movie, right? Yeah, Jason Statham is a guy who pretty much early on figured out his thing, right? And he hasn't deviated from that too much over the years. I just think Mark Wahlberg was really trying to find that, and so this was like, oh man, I got 3 in a row where it didn't quite work. Let's try this now, But I do like your theory too. I think everybody involved in this movie was obviously looking at Ocean's 11 and saying, sure. Could we do that?
And also him, like, obviously being the glue to the film, the man in charge of the heist and the real protagonist of the film. However, this is a true ensemble, so it does feel like the last 3 movies he's made, he is the one and only guy to rely on for the most part. And then going into The Italian Job, I mean, he's playing off of Charlize Theron for most of it. And then Edward Norton. And, again, Jason Statham is finding his place or knows what he's doing. But there's some amazing actors. And then there's a lot of amazing personalities in this, too. So he doesn't have to bear the brunt of, even if this was a flop. You know what I mean?
In fact, I know we'll probably talk more about this in the review, so I won't say too much except to say that because it's an ensemble and because he has those other people to bounce off of, this movie actually plays to his strengths a little bit better than those other ones we talked about, right? Yes. Because some of the onus of certain types of screen presence and what you want in a movie to be entertaining is taken off of him and allowed to play onto other characters instead.
Definitely. I guess a little quick thing in the development of this movie was the early writing stage. Did you see this? That... a rejected idea for this movie was, well, I don't know the idea, but the people who wrote it, which was Neil Purvis and Robert Wade, they wrote 7 Bond films between 1999 and 2021. Paramount rejected their idea for this remake.
It's
you'd think those would be the guys.
I would definitely be curious to read their screenplay. I wonder if it was closer to the original, and that's what I would assume. We should also mention too, I had another question I wanted to ask you because I don't know when they wrote their version and how close it was to the development of this, but a couple of years before this movie comes out, there's also a video game of The Italian Job. The original The Italian Job movie gets a video game from Rockstar Games, and I vaguely remember that, but is that a game you're at all familiar with, or like?
No, that one would be I wouldn't know about that one.
Yeah, I only bring that up because I think it's interesting to remember, as we said, the fact that this movie, there was an Italian Job video game 2 years before this movie based on the Michael Caine movie, proves that movie did have some cultural staying power, right? So this was a wise movie to, as we said, coming off of the Thomas Crown Affair and Ocean's 11. If you're thinking of what other 60s heist movie to pluck for a remake, it makes sense to pick this one because clearly it was one people remembered.
Definitely.
So it doesn't shock me also to hear that, 2 British Bond writers were interested in putting their take on it, but I guess it didn't matter because their version was rejected.
Yeah, the Deep Blue Sea guys got it.
Yeah. What is that? Oh, those guys that wrote those really successful Bond movies. But hey, I do love Deep Blue Sea. So.
Same here. It's a creature feature. What am I trying to say? It holds a real special place in my heart.
Oh, yeah.
I've seen that movie many, many, many times. It was
as a lover of shitty shark movies. That is kind of the shitty shark movie masterpiece.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So,
that one, I'll give you a little anecdote about that one. So we had DirecTV satellite growing up. And it was one of the movies that, I would record on my VCR, and I had an unedited version of Deep Blue Sea, and I used to watch it all the time. And then my brother came in to watch it with me once, and when Stellan Skarsgård's arm gets bit off and all the blood goes everywhere, that was the first time my brother got visibly green watching a movie, and he had to leave the room, and it's a poignant moment in his life that that movie gore just shocked him because he was he's a few years younger than me, and we were pretty young when that movie came out, so it scarred him. So yeah, it scarred him.
A movie we would never have to do because I don't think they were planning on sequels at the time, but then they did end up making them. A franchise that annoys me to no end because the ultimate sequels they did make were called Deep Blue Sea 2 and Deep Blue Sea 3 instead of the obvious Deep 2 Sea and Deep Blue 3. Come on, guys. What are we doing here?
Or Deepest Bluest. Fuck.
I know, yeah.
Jeez, it was right there. It's right there. And yeah, LL Cool J, he survives too. So isn't he in? He's not in the sequels at all, right? I've never seen the sequels.
I've never seen the sequels either. What I do know is that I know the Deep Blue Sea 2 is one of those it's a sequel, but really they just remade the first one essentially.
Right.
And then I think 3 was finally more of an original idea, but by that point, really nobody cared. I mean, they were both DTV anyways.
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you have any other questions for me?
No, those are the questions I wanted to ask.
Okay. Let's talk about The Italian Job.
Sure.
Daddy, Come by, we'll have some breakfast.
It'll be a long trip. I'm in Venice.
Learn the language of poetry, art, romance, sex.
Unlike you, my friend, I don't need a guidebook.
The plan was flawless.
For the next 45 minutes, we own this place, gentlemen.
Okay, Steve, it's right above you.
The heist was perfect. The escape was clean.
What are you gonna do with your share?
I'm gonna get a NAD T77 with 70-watt amps and Burr Brown VACs. It's a big stereo. Speakers so loud they blow women's clothes off.
The only threat was the one they never saw coming.
What the hell are you doing?
I made a few plans of my own.
There's nowhere you can go where we won't find you.
That's probably right, John.
Found him, Stella. He's in Los Angeles.
Stealing that gold is not gonna bring my father back.
It's not about the gold. John was like a father to me, too. And I just can't move on until I've set things right.
They're not in it for the pay.
Hey, Steve?
Gang's all here.
You have no idea how hard it is for me not to reach across this table and kill you.
You want to start the game up again? That's fine with me.
They're in it for the payback.
Come on!
You'll try to take out my guards. I have 5 of them that you don't know about.
I don't do dogs. I had a real bad experience.
What happened?
I had a bad experience.
You'll try to hack the system.
You ready to create the biggest traffic jam in the history of Los Angeles?
I'm so ready.
Oops.
You're gonna try to crack my safe.
You took my father from me. I'm taking this.
You just blew the best thing you had going for you. You just blew the element of surprise.
Surprised?
Why do you get to punch him and I don't?
Paramount Pictures presents
The gold is coming to us. Gridlock every route except for the one we choose. Force that truck to go exactly where we want it to go.
Stop them before they hit the street.
This is it, guys. Moment of truth.
We made our play, and I came out on top.
It's over when I say it's over.
5 seconds of paint on the train.
Mark Wahlberg, Charlize Theron, Edward Norton, Seth Green, Jason Statham, Mose Def, and Donald Sutherland.
You're out of moves. The game is over. Just give up already.
You got no imagination.
What happened to my truck?
Got the Holy Spirit.
The Italian Job.
You know this was never about the gold.
Whatever helps you sleep at night, sweetheart.
After a gang of professional thieves successfully robs $35 million in gold bars from a safe held by Italian gangsters in Venice, they are betrayed and left for dead by one of their allies. 1 year later, Charlie and his crew seek revenge, planning another elaborate heist against the traitor to get their gold back.
A very simple but very succinct and accurate summary of this version of the Italian Job. Chris, I'll let you go first in this one. I am curious. I'm not even sure if this was like your first time watch or not. This is another movie that you and I have just never talked about. But so first, just tell me, if any, did you have any history of this movie before, and then what did you think of it this time?
Well, you kind of mentioned it before that this was a movie that was always on TV.
Yeah,
and there was like a few years there between 2004 and 2007 where this movie was just on reruns constantly, and that is where I caught it. Because I'd be lying to say if I have seen it from start to finish in one sitting. So I think this was the first time I watched it from beginning to end. So I've always been aware of it, of course. Like I said, extremely culturally relevant, a big hit, referenced among friends,
One of those posters that's just like burned into my brain, right? Because probably because I saw the DVD at the video store all the time,
100%. I even think that standee is in other movies that take place at video rental stores, It's one of those types of films. So extremely aware of the movie as a whole. So yeah, sitting down to watch this after Planet of the Apes and The Big Hit, I guess those two movies showed me what I hate and what I like from Mark Wahlberg. So Planet of the Apes, he's way too serious, way too action man, too speechy, and he's bad at it,
Yeah, I think that's more the issue. He's just bad at it. He also seems like disinterested in it.
Yes. So a man that is out of his depth, but also just doesn't want to be there and is just not the right guy. We covered that in length. So then I watched The Big Hit, and that is much more the Mark Wahlberg that I prefer. I I don't even think I've said this even in last episode, but I do like Mark Wahlberg. I do like him in a lot of stuff. But as we've been discussing in these 2 episodes and in the next 2 coming, there's different stages and phases of his career. So the big hit version of Mark Wahlberg, I quite like. It's goofier. It's kind of dopier, you know?
Not just goofy and dopey, but can I ask you something too, if you agree with this? Because I realize what I think about, like what I like about his performance in The Big Hit is, you know what I think Mark Wahlberg excels at is I really like exacerbated Mark Wahlberg. Like you think like when Mark Wahlberg is like out of his element and is just like super frustrated, he does that very well in Boogie Nights. He does that really well in Big Hit. That was actually our problem with him in Planet of the Apes, right? That he never acted shocked or like, you know, confused by what he was going through. He doesn't play confidence very well. He plays like, oh my God, what is happening very well, I think.
So I'm going to piggyback off that, what you just said. And I will say that I quite liked him in this movie. And there is a goofier, dopier side to the film. You know, like the movie is very playful. It's joyful. There's a personality and tone to it that is very, it's obviously it starts with a revenge, you know, plot of a ally killing their mentor, right? Which is heady stuff, but the movie doesn't get warped or tied down by it. It becomes like just a good fucking time, I would say. And what I liked about Mark Wahlberg in this movie is in the cast of colorful characters, he is actually quite a good, confident leader. And I felt his charisma really shined through in this, and he really cares about his team. And going back to things I like about heist movies, I want the leader to really care about their team and really look out for them and make sure that they feel okay about what they're doing. And there's scenes in here that we're going to talk about in specificity, but like Charlize Theron's character is the daughter of Donald Sutherland's character, John Bridger, who dies early in the movie and is the crux of the inception point of the movie. Mm-hmm. And Charlize Theron plays a professional safecracker, you know. So Charlie and his team need her to be part of the fold. And what I like about his dynamic with her is that she's not used to this. She is not part of heists. She is not a thief. If anything, she has had issues with her dad in her life because he was a thief. So I found Mark Wahlberg's performance very natural and understated and very... He almost does take that mentorship role rather than a romantic role. Mm-hmm. I'll say right now, they never kiss. And love that. Love it.
But because it's a Hollywood movie, they do at the very, very end make sure to be like, by the way, they let
you. The last, I have problems with the last. I have problems with the credit scenes, okay? Extremely unneeded. But I just found Mark's performance in this, like he is the team leader, and this movie does fall on his shoulders, but he's got a cast of colorful characters around him that makes this movie just a joy. I really liked it. I don't think this is Ocean's 11. I don't think it's Heat, but I think it's a very good time. You know what I mean? It's just like a good fucking movie. Like I said, I wrote that in my notes. You know, I threw it on and I was having an exhaustive day, and I was like, oh, son of a bitch, I gotta watch a movie. And it kind of, you know, it woke me up, you know, and I had a good time. So, you know, I'll leave it at that for now, and I'll throw it to you, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
I'm going to pause for 1 second because my cat has like the zoomies in here, and I'm just going to throw her out.
Okay, yeah, sounds good.
You can probably hear like things jingling, and I want to make sure I get it. Okay, 1 second. Okay, we didn't need her thoughts on the Italian Job. So.
I like that I did hear her be like,
yeah. All right. Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with a caveat in that I agree mostly for the most part with what you said, in that I also enjoyed this movie. I definitely didn't see this in the theater. I don't think I rented it either. I definitely did catch up with this on cable, but I do remember it being on cable all the time and seeing it then. And what I remember at that time is I remember it was one of those like where you talk to your friends and be like, no, that Italian Job movie, it's actually kind of surprisingly good, you know? And I think that's kind of coming off of, like we said, Mark Wahlberg having a series of kind of misses and maybe being like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that Italian Job. And then watching bits and pieces on cable, and then eventually just sitting down watching more of it and going, yeah, this is actually surprisingly very entertaining, you know? Where I would like only slightly disagree with you is that I don't want to call Mark Wahlberg like the weak link in this movie. I think he's perfectly fine. I do think you said it rests on his shoulders. I alluded to this earlier. I think what works best for him here is that I feel like it doesn't rest on his shoulders. I feel like there's all these other like really interesting, captivating characters that kind of take the pressure off him, and I think that works really well because I think
I guess I meant maybe in universe. Universe. That's maybe what I meant.
Okay, yeah, I can accept that because he is kind of saddled with like the straight man part, right?
Yeah.
But that said, like, you know, I will not deny at all, this movie plays to his strengths a lot more than Planet of the Apes was.
Oh, yeah.
In that he's just allowed to be like kind of, I don't want to say regular guy because he's a super thief, you know, but he's obviously very clever. But yeah, he's just allowed to be just like the guy who makes the plans, and then everyone else gets to have all the jokes and be very charismatic and be, you know, sure, much more memorable. And I think you come out of this movie remembering other characters more than him, you know, even though he's ostensibly the leading man. So we'll say more about that. But the movie in general, very, very entertaining. Something you and I guess everybody talks about a lot now is like people love to use the word slop for our current like cinematic landscape, right? It's just full of so much, you know, like what superhero cinema has become, and all these like IP driven blockbusters and everything. Which I guess you would consider this to be IP, I suppose, considers a remake. Sure. But this is a very, I want to call this like serviceable slop, right? Where you said this is not Ocean's 11. And I think that's an important like distinction because when you get a director like Steven Soderbergh to make Ocean's 11, he is someone who will take the heist movie and come up with this like really cool, unique visual and, you know, aesthetic take on it. That's not F. Gary Gray, you know. No offense to F. Gary Gray. I quite like Friday. But if you look over his filmography, he seems more of like a journeyman kind of director. And it's not like he brought anything very captivating or new to the table with this. But he was very lucky in that he was just working with a very dependable genre and a script that hits all the pieces as it should.
Yep.
And then like really good, like really fun characters played by, you know, interesting, charismatic actors. So this is like, we you know, sometimes we talk about like dad movies. I'd say this is kind of in that realm, but like a very, very good version of it where it's just like, this movie is doing everything this genre is asked to do, you know, and it's not always exceeding any of those elements, but it's not downplaying any of them either. You get what you want from a heist movie in this. You get like, you know, some very fun action sequences. You get some very, very like, you know, fun characters in the crew. There's some decent humor. The end, I believe, is like satisfying. You know, it's kind of nice, like a good revenge. Well, not the very end, as we said, but before the end, the heist itself is satisfying. This is you know, this is the kind of movie where sometimes you and I are like, oh my god, how are we going to talk about this? Because it's just kind of like it's a very, very like good gentleman's like B+ kind of movie, you know. Yeah. And sometimes that's what you want. I don't want to live in a world where all movies are like this. But I also wouldn't want to live in a world where movies like this are forgotten about or disregarded. We need these kind of like mid-level, just, that's a really strong, good, like, you know, like decent genre programmer. We need these every once in a while. And it was nice to go back to the time when we were getting these.
Well, it's funny because F. Gary Gray goes on to make Fate of the Furious, right?
Yeah.
And so the 8th installment. And that franchise kind of takes this baton in a weird way and does become the heist films of today, which are now, you know, $200 to $350 million budgets filled with CGI, filled with
that's the thing. They couldn't let those just
stunts.
They couldn't just let them stay heist movies, right? They had to become superhero movies, essentially.
Exactly. So, like, when I compare that film, which I don't think you saw Fast 8, right?
I was out after 6. So.
Okay, fair enough. But Fast 8 is bad. Fast 8 it's like the franchise became self-aware and, like, truly went off the rails. Like, there's a scene in The Italian Job where there's like 300 real cars causing a traffic jam, okay? There's a scene in Fate of the Furious where it has a similar scene of like 300 plus cars driving around the streets. And Trev, guess what? It's fucking CGI gobbledygook. Of course it is, right? This is the era of films that I think we lament for, you know, the ones that we wish we had so much more of and we look fondly on. So again, is this a 4-star masterpiece? No, not even a little bit. But for those 5 or 6 points we rattled off regarding heist films, this one checks like all of those boxes.
Yeah, it's a movie
fairly
like,
well too.
It's a movie that back in the day when movie tickets were cheaper, you wouldn't mind this, like, right? You would go with all your friends, go see this movie, and then afterwards you'd go out to dinner, you'd talk about what you liked, and then you might never think about it again, right?
Yeah,
But you had a good time that night, and you didn't leave angry. You left satisfied, and you got a good like conversation out of it. You remembered a couple jokes, and then you just kind of moved on with your life, and that's perfectly fine. So and we don't get that anymore, right? Because now everyone is like so. It's funny because we're doing this, and we'll talk a little bit about, this is a potential franchise starter. Obviously, I think they were probably thinking about that a little bit, but it doesn't play like that, right? This doesn't play like a movie that's desperate to start a franchise, which is like something that sinks a lot of current movies.
Sure.
It's not trying to extend its reach or go too far in anything it's trying to do. It's just trying to be like a fun little, like Friday night movie, and it pulls it off. I did just want to point out, you mentioned how you think F. Gary Gray made like maybe one of the worst Fast and the Furious movies. I'm looking at his filmography here, and the good news is he did rebound with a movie we covered before, of course, Men in Black International, which I remember us both thinking is just fantastic. So
yeah, go listen back to that. Yeah. Yeah, I think again, when you watch a heist film, I want the camaraderie. I think we're going to talk so much about this cast, but I need to believe beyond a shadow of a doubt that this crew has history and they like each other, because it makes like the evil guy turn, like the heel turn mean more.
Mm-hmm.
You care about these characters. You want them to succeed, and especially if you're adding a revenge plot to this, you want them to take revenge on the bad guy, which we'll just say right now is Edward Norton. He plays.
We know he's the bad guy because of that mustache.
The mustache, and he's the bad guy because he absolutely did not want to make this movie in any way, shape, or form. So he was signed to a 3-movie deal with Paramount, and Seth Green kind of, I don't know, let it slip, but talked in an interview years ago that's saying that Norton took this role under duress and really did not want to do it, and he was like mean to the crew. And Edward Norton kind of has a history of being a pain in the ass. So I 100% believe that.
I read, because like what I read was that he was actually like fairly professional on the set, but at the same time he was professional, but also was always making it like known that he was like, I'm not here because I want to be. So it's like
the whole that Marshawn Lynch, like I'm just here so I don't get fined.
Yeah, it's funny because so basically it's not like he kept turning down every other movie Paramount was asking him to do, and finally like, you got to make something. We signed to this contract. Yeah, it's just so funny to me, and I think Edward Norton to me seems like someone who has matured a lot recently, like in recent years. You don't hear those stories about him too much anymore. I feel like maybe getting into like Wes Anderson world was like calming influence on him or something. And now it's funny because he seems like he always plays like really like decent people, which is not what he was known for early on. He was trying to be like a young kind of like Pacino, or he wanted to be like the young play these like young Hellraisers and complicated characters, and now he's playing like just Pete Seeger. It's like, wow. But anyways, I think because he was he also he even did interviews at the time where he's like, well, my fans should like not see this movie. So it's not like he was trying to keep it a secret.
Yeah.
But it's so funny to me that even an actor like him, right? Even like Mr. Serious Guy, a guy who later on would like pursue an Incredible Hulk movie and be like, yeah, no, I like Hulk comics, so I want to make a Hulk movie. Why was he so angry about having to be in a movie like this?
I know.
Like, this isn't like the bottom of the barrel, right? It's not like they were asking him to make like, I'll even choose something I love, right? It's not like they were like, look, we're Paramount, you got to make Friday the 13th Part 9 or something, They're like, hey, do you want to go be the bad guy in a pretty star-studded big heist movie, a remake of like a classic British film? What's his deal?
Well, and
this is not the kind. And even like when you watch the movie, he's got kind of a meaty, fun role too. Yeah. So it's not like he was being asked to do like some shit character that gives him nothing to work with.
I wrote down that, was he really a jerk on set, or was he just so damn method?
Yeah.
There is a case to be made for that, like, because Edward Norton, there's stories about him for all these years, and especially early in his career, like full on method and hard to work with, and demands everybody's perfection because he's bringing it, in his opinion.
And here's the thing I'll say, and I'm curious to hear if you agree. When you hear these stories about how he did not want to be in this movie, he did it under duress, it is kind of surprising to me because he kind of rules in this.
Oh, he's awesome. He's awesome.
Yeah, he's really, really good in this. So it's like, wow, like that's maybe they should force him to make more movies because if that was feeding his performance, then good on it. He's a really despicable bad guy, but also he's really smarmy in a way that's entertaining, right?
Yep.
He finds just that right twinkle in his eye where he's not a despicable bad guy to the point of where you don't want to watch him. Mm-hmm. He's just so smarmy that he's like fun to watch, but you can't wait to see him get his comeuppance.
And he's like perpetually annoyed.
Yeah.
You know, like he's getting his way. He has tens of millions of dollars, a beautiful car. Actually, my favorite car at the time was the Aston Martin V12 Vanquish because of Die Another Day. That was my dream car as a kid. So he's got the car and he's got the mansion, and you know he seemingly has a pretty sweet fucking life, and he's got all the stereo systems and the big screen TV, but he's still just pissed off.
Yeah, I think that's actually really funny on a script level too. That's a very funny character detail about that character, is that and early in the film when they pull off their original Italian heist, and then they're talking about what they're all going to do with the money before he turns on them. He can't really think of anything, but everyone else lists what they're going to do. You know, like the one like Jason Statham says he's going to get that Aston Martin, and Seth Green talks about this very particular stereo system. And then we see later on after he turns on them and makes off with all the money himself, he's like such a vapid person. He couldn't think of anything other than to buy everything they talked about. So he bought the same car and stereo system that they wanted to get. And I just love that as a character. It tells you actually everything you need to know about that guy, right? That he's like super selfish, but he's also like he's not clever enough to be the guy. So he even has to take their their plans for what they would do with their earnings.
I love that you just mentioned the original Italian heist. Okay, so one thing I will say that I either forgot or just need to be reminded of, because I'm watching the film, right? And it starts out in Italy for like the first 8 to 10 minutes. And it's riveting. It's awesome. It's your opening heist. It's the kind of heist you want. It's got speedboat chases. It's got vaults falling through or blowing up through the floorboards and getting they're safe cracking underwater, and it's they're playing kind of like a shell game, with the vault.
It's also got like the tech that you would like not expect to see because we're not professional thieves, like the explosive paint and
awesome.
Like this the cool little detail of how they have to like perfectly sync up on each level where they're putting the paint. So yeah.
It's so good. Yeah. Shows off all of the roles of every team member. Then I'm waiting for the whole movie. And I'm like, when are they going to get back to Italy?
I know. That's funny, too, because I said the same thing where I was like watching when they finally said Italian Job in the movie. I watched this with my wife, and I was like, oh, they said the thing. And then I was like, I bet you were wondering why this movie's called The Italian Job, because I know I was. I've forgotten.
Yeah, I totally forgot that it's literally just the inciting incident.
Yeah, so and then later they say, we'll do this like The Italian Job.
Correct. So I mean, we'll get to it, but the sequel that was reportedly in development was called The Brazilian Job, which weirdly enough kind of becomes Fast 5 in my mind. You know what I mean? But
also funny because it just makes you think of like shaved pubic hair.
Oh, for sure. And that is a movie I'd watch with Charlize Theron. Okay, but if they were ever to make The Brazilian Job, I would hope that the movie majority of it takes place in Brazil. That's why I'm kind of a negative in this movie, is that I love that it takes place in Italy and then goes to LA for the majority. But I did wish we got back to Italy for some reason.
Man, I almost have like the opposite opinion where, and I don't know, maybe this is just me being contrarian for like just to be like an ass or something, but I kind of love that it's called The Italian Job just because at some point he's like, well, we'll do it like The Italian Job. Just as like,
I guess.
That almost seems kind of clever. And what's funny is I feel like if this was made today, because I mentioned how this is just kind of, it's mostly an in-name only remake, but Mark Wahlberg's character's name is Charlie Croker, and that was Michael Caine's name in the movie as well. I think if they made this today, they would just make this a legacy sequel to the original, and Mark Wahlberg would have been like the son of Michael Caine's character. And he would be like, well, let's do it like my dad's Italian Job, the job they pulled off in Italy. That's what they would have done. And honestly, that would have still worked, but I'm glad they didn't do that, obviously.
Yeah, totally. Hell, this is 22 years old, so they could literally they could do that now with this version.
Yeah. Timothy Chalamet as Charlie Croker Jr.
Oh my God. Get Edward Norton back.
Yeah, what is he still under contract?
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about Mark Wahlberg, obviously Man of the Hour, but I really liked his calm confidence. for the guy that has to be the rock and the glue to the team and the ultimate professional planner, I just found him very sweet and loving with the crew members, and I really felt it. Like, not that I was getting emotional about it or nothing, but like there's a couple scenes in here where Charlize Theron is kind of freaking out.
Yeah.
And
this is something.
I loved it.
Sorry,
I loved
not
that.
to cut you off, but this
Sure.
is something my wife and I talked about after the movie because, like, I said we watched Planet of the Apes together, but she like fell asleep during Planet of the Apes, and like understandably, and we both talked afterwards about how bad Wahlberg was in that.
Yeah.
And then we watched this, and afterwards I was asking her like, so what did you think of him in this? And she actually pointed out, and this totally goes into what you were saying, and I have to agree that she's like, well, his best moments in this are the moments that actually asked him to be just kind of like sweet. You know, like with the moments like where he is comforting Charlize Theron after she has to where she has her first or second, I guess, interaction with Edward Norton, or where she's worried about how she has to go into his home as posing as someone else. In those moments where he's playing kind of brotherly or almost like a father figure to her, that's his best stuff in the movie. I think he's a little more stiff when he's being asked to be serious, leader man again. I think whenever Mark Wahlberg is asked to play more real emotion, right? When he's asked to play, like I said, where he's nervous or out of his depth and getting really, really flustered, or when he's playing kind of sweet, charming, romantic guy, that's where he actually excels, and this movie shows it.
And I think because Mark Wahlberg is, he has charm. He's a charismatic, good-looking movie star. You know
what it is? I think he's so naturally charming, and I think what happens is when he's asked to do the kind of more stereotypical leading man action thing, or you're the leader of the crew, I think he gets in his head a little bit.
I think so too.
And he tries to put it on and too thick, and he's trying to be too serious, and that's what throws him off. And then when he's asked to just be hey, be a human being and be really real and genuine in this moment, that's where he's really, really strong.
Not even flinching.
I'm not sure having a civilian on the crew's a good idea, John.
She's got the skill and she's got the motivation.
Exactly. She's emotional. You know what happens when emotion gets into it.
Look, don't kid yourself, all right? We're all emotional on this one. Let's go. Are you ready?
Go, Sam.
Yeah, my fiance came up and was watching parts of Planet of the Apes and was just oh my God, and just left the room, right? But when I was watching this one, she was kind of standing behind the couch during these quiet moments, and I could sense that she was taken with him,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it was a real not star making performance, but this is the reason why Mark Wahlberg's a movie star. This is the stuff we go see him do, and his relationship with Charlize Theron and this crew is just really, really good. And I'm so glad they didn't kiss. I keep saying that because, like you said, brotherly, fatherly, mentorly, it would have I just didn't want to see it. And again, the post-credit scene, regardless, I needed this man to take care of his crew. And I'm gonna bring up a movie that we had a little disagreement on. Jack Ryan, Shadow Recruit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that movie put Jack's wife in danger multiple times, who has no training, no nothing, and somehow everybody's okay with it, and she's great at it. Sometimes she's even better than Jack Ryan. In this movie, you put Charlize Theron as Stella Bridger into these dangerous situations, and she's noticeably frightened. She's scared. She's actually not good at it. There's almost an identical scene where she goes to dinner with Norton as the villain, and Edward Norton sniffs her out immediately, and then Mark Wahlberg has to save the day, and which I can only be described as a blinding punch. There is my allegedly joke. Sorry. He blinded an Asian man. Anyway, okay. We allowed to say that? Should I cut that?
Well, it actually turned out that he did not. He thought he blinded the guy, and the guy later revealed that he was actually blinded from something before that. So
he just walked into Mark's fist.
Well, no, the hate crime was real. The blinding was not. So
yeah, okay. So everything I said about his natural charm and charisma out the window now, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, I guess we should say, since we're trying to be factually accurate, we should bring up that he did ultimately apologize, and the guy accepted his apology. But you know what? Well, we'll have more to say about this. But actually, because we're trying to go through his career, like kind of chronologically, I feel like this is still the point where that stuff wasn't as public as it is now, and we weren't very aware of it. And I feel like I probably didn't hear about that stuff until after this movie. So let's actually just put a button on that and talk about it more next time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Regarding his charisma and confidence here, I think I'm just glad we agree on that. I didn't want to debate that point of the film.
No, like I said, I don't think I walk away. I feel like about his performance the same way I feel about the movie, right? Where it's like I don't walk away from it blown away by it, but it's like it's doing exactly what it needs to do. It's perfectly serviceable, right? And this is a good comeback movie for him, coming off of 3 movies where he seemed out of his element. Yeah. This is a movie where you go like, okay, he's getting back on track here. He's finding the kinds of roles he should take. So that definitely works better here. We should talk about some other performers though, because we said this has got a pretty strong cast even around him. We've already mentioned him. We've mentioned Norton. I want to quickly point out someone who has like probably one of the least amounts of screen time in the movie, but is like so important to it, because you talked about how we need to believe that this crew has been like a family for a while. We need to get the stakes set early on. If you need to establish, in just like 5 minutes, a father figure that you believe everybody would be motivated to seek revenge for, you can't go too wrong with getting Donald Sutherland. Yeah. Who is in this movie for only a few minutes, but is so good. And it really, his chemistry with Mark Wahlberg is like really, really strong. Like I feel like the two of them together, that works really, really well. I really bought them as like, like a surrogate son, surrogate father. There is a little bit of like weird, too much of sexual energy on the phone call he has with Charlize Theron at the very beginning of the movie, where she's like in her underwear in bed and she's like, "Hi, Daddy," and he's like, "I bought you a gift, honey." I'm like, "Oh, all right."
I felt that same way, that I had to remind myself that they were father and daughter.
But he doesn't. But thankfully, he never shares the screen with her, so we don't have to think too much about that. No. But he does share the screen with all of them, and he is, Donald Sutherland, man, one of the greats, right? Because he can play total batshit crazy and insane, but he can also just play like so like loving and so like I don't know, just warm, and that's what he is here. Even though this master thief, you really buy him as this father figure for all of them. And even though we only know him for like a few minutes, even though this is just kind of a programmer B movie, I think you feel his death. It's really sad and really like kind of frustrating to see what happens to him.
Well, and I think it works too because, like you said, the chemistry between him and Mark Wahlberg is undeniable, and the amount of times they're like patting each other on the back. It's 5 minutes that they're like talking to each other, but they're just so proud of one another. They're so happy that they've gotten rich together. They're so happy that they've learned from each other. They're so happy to be part of the crew. There's like not a shred of animosity or, well, there's no jokes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, like the MCU-ifying of things. It's not played for laughs whatsoever. And I think me and you really respond to innate like sincerity and earnestness in our media. So when you're unapologetically sincere, it really works.
Love the toast. You could have pulled this off with your eyes closed.
Nah, you were incredible. Just incredible. You saw the whole picture, you covered all the angles. Charlie, there are 2 kinds of thieves in this world. The ones who steal to enrich their lives, and the ones who steal to define their lives. Don't be the latter. Makes you miss out on what's really important in this life.
What are you talking about, John? Been a good father.
Sitting in prisons doesn't make you a good father. I spent half my kid's life in prison. Don't get to be my age with nothing but this, Charlie. Find somebody you want to spend the rest of your life with. Then hold on to her forever. Okay?
Hey! That's mine. Let's go. I'm freezing my ass off.
Yeah. Steve's getting cold. You too?
All right.
I love you, kid. You did really great.
Thanks, John.
Let's go.
Well, you know what else really works about it, and I was like, because this is young screenwriters take note of this, and young filmmakers take note of it. If you can get an actor as strong as Donald Sutherland to pull this off, we were mentioning how you have to believe for the rest of the movie that Mark Wahlberg is this like competent, capable leader that all these guys would follow. And you know why we believe that? Because Donald Sutherland believes it.
Yeah.
Because Donald Sutherland, we're introduced to him getting ready to retire, and he has faith in Mark Wahlberg to take over, and he's like talking up Mark Wahlberg's skills, and that actually makes us as an audience feel more comfortable with Wahlberg as in this like leader role, saying like, oh yeah, he must be really good at what he does, because Donald Sutherland, the great Donald Sutherland, was like willing to pass the torch to him. And so that's like a very, very smart thing to do in a screenplay, as a show that, oh, we know we don't need to put in all the work of showing this guy become the leader, because the previous leader has already accepted it and is kind of telling the other guys like, no, you're in good hands. I'm leaving, but you're in good hands with Charlie here.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I'm glad we get Seth Green in a movie. I haven't seen him for a while. Of course, this is a 22-year-old movie, but
this is when you couldn't help but see Seth Green everywhere.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But I love Seth Green. It's he's just kind of a joy to watch, and he's funny. He's the team's computer expert in this. They do this fun little reveal, at least from his perspective, that he really invented Napster, and the real guy Sean Fanning, stole the idea from him while he was sleeping, and that's why
the real Sean Fanning
Napster.
The real Sean Fanning actually cameos as himself, showing him steal it from him. Yeah, which is very, very funny.
It's great.
It's very, very dated, and I think like any young person watching the movie today is definitely not going to understand that cameo, but it might also just be like, what is Napster?
Well, that's what I wanted to cut in to say this too. Napster led to Morpheus, Kazaa, LimeWire, and now people, when they pirate things, they torrent it, right? And before, you had to use these file sharing programs, usually would brick your computer. You would take the risk of your family computer right away to actually get the movie. Usually it may be a cam version at the time, or it was not the right thing that you wanted. So yeah, very dated. Early 2000s, the Wild West of the internet for this kind of pirating.
Alex Winter of Bill and Ted fame made a really great like documentary about Napster. I really heavily recommend everyone go watch it for like just a interesting snapshot of that time. But it's fascinating to go back and remember that Napster really did only exist for like a few months. Like it got taken out very, very fast. But I definitely remember those months, and I do remember being one of the people who like got it and being just amazed by it. And of course, everyone being like, oh, the amazing thing about Napster is like, all those like musical artists you like, you can find all their like demos and like concerts that you would never be able to find. And then everyone's just like, yeah, that's cool. Anyways, can I get porn on it? It's just like,
yeah, and then Metallica really was the ones that said
they were the death knell for that. Yeah, but you know what? They were right in retrospect. Like,
for sure.
That is the thing. Like Napster is the beginning of the end for the music industry, also. So or at least of a certain version of it.
Jason Statham.
Yeah.
He is Jason Statham in this, and I like that.
This is still comparatively very early Jason Statham too, right?
Yes, you can tell with his hair. You can tell where he is in his career with the amount of hair he has.
It's really funny you mentioned the hair, because as you said, he drives his like dream car in this is an Aston Martin, and eventually we get to see him in the Aston Martin, and that reminded me that around this time I think there was actually discussion of like, could Jason Statham be the next Bond? Because we were like waiting to see what was going to happen with like, is Pierce Brosnan going to stay on or what? And I remember Jason Statham being one of the ones that was talked about, and I soon remember a lot of people being like, that guy doesn't have enough hair to be James Bond. Like that was the main concern, which is It's funny. I said earlier on that Jason Statham kind of found his thing and stuck to it, and for the most part, that's true. But there is still like two versions of that, right? But they still fall into the same basic archetype, because he came onto the scene, no pun intended, like a bullet, like in 1998 with Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, and then 2000 Snatch. So like Guy Ritchie finds him, and he's just got this like immediate. There's just something about him where you just can't take your eyes off him on screen. But it's actually not until like The One in 2001, and then more specifically The Transporter in 2002, where it's like, wait, this guy's like also a martial artist. Like he's not just like he's not just a like got a cool accent and just like this like bloke kind of tough guy figure. He can also like kick ass like alongside like Jet Li. Like what the heck? So The Italian Job is his first movie after The Transporter, and it's interesting to see like it's almost like I wonder if when they made this, if they had known that the transporter was going to hit like it was, if they would have added a fight scene for him, because it feels like that's the only thing missing, right? But those are his two modes, right? He can do movies without fight scenes too, but he's still going to be the sexy, too cool for school. He's the one people can't take their eyes off of, member of the crew. So of course, when he plays Handsome Rob, and his whole thing is like, well, he's the guy that can just get any woman to sleep with him. It's like, yeah, all right, I can buy that for him.
I love that he's just this, like, he's a gruff, charming ladies man in like everything he does, but he's okay with taking the piss out of himself too. Like that's what
I think, especially in recent years too. He's gotten even better at that in recent years. Yeah.
But he has great timing. You know, he has. Yes, he's very self-serious, but he's got this glimmer in his eye and this smirk that he knows he's in on the joke. And that's why I think he's sustained this long career of playing Jason Statham. And I think people just really like seeing him, me included. So yeah,
he's impressive because he's sustained that career at a time where nobody else has been able to sustain that kind of career, right? Like we mentioned in the last episode, I can't remember what the context was, but I talked about, you know, the transition point where, I think it's because we were talking about The Big Hit. And I talked about the transition point in American action movies where, you know, like Schwarzenegger, Stallone, but then even like Van Damme and Seagal were like not like hip anymore. And Statham is like such a throwback to that like Van Damme, Seagal era, but like he's the only one who's been able to maintain like Hollywood leading man status in that. You know, there's like the Scott Adkins who like action fans like, but all his movies are still pretty much like DTV, you know, they're not like theatrical releases, but Statham has like been able to maintain that. And yeah, in recent years, I think a lot of Statham movies kind of have that, like, oh, is he in like something like The Beekeeper, right? You're like, oh, he's in on the joke now, right? Like he knows how silly this is, but he's going to play it straight enough that it works. I think the ultimate proof of that, like what rules about him is if I scroll through his filmography, I'm just going to say there are probably more bad Jason Statham movies than there are good.
There is.
But I don't think anyone's ever like turned on him, you know? Like I've never been like, oh, like you know how you and I feel about The Rock? Yeah. I don't know that I'd ever get to that point with Jason Statham where it's like, oh, he's making so many bad movies, but you know what? I still like Jason Statham. You just can't help but like him, you know?
Totally. Yeah. Because even like he, you know, he becomes a mainstay in the Fast franchise too, and he's great as a villain. And then when the stupid movies fucking take a turn to make him a good guy, it's frustrating as hell. But no, I'm always happy to see him, really in everything. Honestly, he's one of those what do you call them? Never goods, never bads. He's never a never bad. Yeah, he is a never bad.
Yeah, whether he's punching a shark in the face or, you know, whether he's the wheelman in a heist crew.
Yeah. Mos Def is in this film.
Mos Def, yeah. Well, the former Mos Def. He was still Mos Def at this point. He's now Yasin Bey, as we know. But
is that what that's what he is now? I didn't know that.
Yeah. I believe he converted to Muslim and took the name Yasin Bey. And also it's like pretty much unfortunately, I'm going to say unfortunately, and that'll probably give away what I'm about to say, more or less unfortunately retired from acting. I think he's just not interested in acting anymore because watching this movie, I was reminded, man, this is a guy who has great screen presence. He's just so immediately like charismatic on screen, very, very funny. I think he actually, you know, you wouldn't think in a movie that has Statham and Seth Green that maybe like I think there's an argument to be made that he steals like a lot of humor in this movie.
Oh
yeah. He's great. He's awesome in this. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say my favorite part with him is him and Mark Wahlberg getting the explosives ready, and
great.
he's like, you know, we might be the last people we see. So, you know, like, I love you. It's like, yeah, no, I love you too. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Okay. It was a nice little moment.
Yeah.
Is Frankie G as Wrench? Is he the guy from Saw 2?
He is indeed. Yeah.
Okay. I knew it. Okay. I thought you'd just tell me right away, so I never looked it up. But yes, he is the big gruff dude from Saw 2 that gets the puzzle piece off of his neck, right? From his back of his neck. Yeah.
Like he's like the kind of antagonist in Saw 2 in the house. Yeah. It's funny because his name came up in the opening credits of this, and I immediately thought, it was like, I confused him for Noel G, the guy who's in like, you know, he's in some of the Fast and Furious movies. He basically plays the same character in like everything. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. I was like, oh, that guy's in this. I don't remember that. But no, I was like, oh no, it's Frankie G. And then I was like, oh, it's the Saw 2 guy. Yeah.
He even shows some range too, hey? Because like I've seen Saw 2 many, many times, and he is not the same persona that he is in this movie.
In fact, because I'd kind of forgotten, he's not in this very much. He's like the late addition. But because I just have like Saw 2 version of him in my head, when he showed up, I was like, oh, is he going to be just like a dick? You know, is that like going to be his role in this too? Is he going to be like hard to work with? And it's like, oh no, he's something different in this.
He was great. He was great.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the crew. I mean, we talked about Charlize Theron earlier, but she's obviously fantastic and absolutely beautiful, and the most beautiful cable technician that could ever be imagined showing up to your house to fix your TV.
So they sent her. They're like, you got to go undercover. You got to pose as like the cable technician to go into Edward Norton's house to find out where he has the safe. Right? Where is he keeping all the gold he took from us? And they're like, you're the only member of the crew he's never seen. You know, because there's a whole thing in the movie about how Donald Sutherland was a bad dad and he never brought his daughter around. Yeah. So like, well, you got to go in, and so she poses as a cable lady, goes to Edward Norton's house. They're listening, she's mic'd up, and then Edward Norton starts hitting on her, and it just made me laugh because because Mark Wahlberg's like, he's flirting with her, and I was like, yeah, a cable person who looks like Charlize Theron just came to his house. Yes, he's flirting with her. What were you expecting?
I do love that becomes a joke in universe, right? Mm-hmm. Like they at least call attention to it, but also the girl who was supposed to be the technician that Jason Statham's handsome Rob charms out of her uniform, so to speak, Becky, to get the uniform to give it to Charlize, is also pretty hot. Yeah. So it's kind of like saying, okay, well, we have a hottie that's going to become even more of a hottie. So just go with it, audience. We know what we're doing. So I like that.
I did just want to quickly point out too, I don't know if you came across this in your research, Chris, but this movie is actually a very important movie in Charlize Theron's overall like evolution and filmography as well, because this is like one of the first action movies she does. And actually she was kind of upset about, she didn't have like an Edward Norton experience in this. She wanted to do this movie, but she has since talked about how she felt very frustrated making this movie because she was treated to like, some like gender issues. Where she said that she was forced to train for 6 weeks longer than the men. So I'm just going to read this quote from her talking about that. I realized there was still so much misconception around women in the genre. Even though in that film the action is really based on cars, we had to physically do a lot of that stuff. There was a real pressure to pull off all these stunts with the actors. There was a very unfair process that went with that. I was the only woman with a bunch of guys, and I remember vividly getting the schedule in our pre-production, and they had scheduled me for 6 weeks more hard training than any of the guys. It was just so insulting. But she has said in sense that it put a real fire under my ass, and she was like, all right, you guys want to play this game? Let's go. I made it a point to outdrive all those guys. I vividly remember Mark Wahlberg halfway through one of our training sessions pulling over and throwing up because he was so nauseous from doing 360s. So I remember her talking. That kind of came up in the press run when she was doing the Old Guard, but I remember her kind of making the point about like when later on when she did Furiosa, obviously she was like, well, no, I'm a badass. You don't have to treat me like that. So yeah, good old Hollywood sexism,
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
She is great in this, though.
Oh yeah,
she's never bad.
Yeah.
But what I love too is you have to really I don't know how to crack a safe. I know you're shocked, but I don't know how to crack a safe. Mm-hmm. But watching Charlize crack a safe makes me believe that she knows exactly what she's doing.
Well, and again, and I mentioned earlier, so I like for me saying that this movie is just like not anything special and just kind of meat and potatoes, and again, not in a bad way, but I have to keep putting asterisks on that because there are a lot of like very, very clever, like it's almost like, are we sure this is from the Deep Blue Sea guys? I do love Deep Blue Sea, but I mentioned like the economy, right, of using the Donald Sutherland character to make us like Mark Wahlberg, but to what you just said about her being such a great safe cracker, there comes the moment where in the middle of the heist they like switch safes on her, like it's like not the safe she's expecting. Yeah. And I love this idea too, where she's like, well, the thing with this safe is there's like a plate of glass in there, and if you shatter the glass, it like locks the safe to where it can't be opened. And then she's trying to break in, and what happens? She cracks the glass. She screws up, and I love that because like I think a lot of writers would like just be like, she's just got to be badass and she's got to open every safe, and instead she fucks up, and she she's the one who necessitates a change of plan, as we just said, and we love when they have to have a change of plan and you have to see them like change everything on the fly. And so I like that. It makes her more human and it makes her more believable because she is new to this. She's the most nervous one. She's never done this before. She might make a mistake, and I like that the movie acknowledges that.
Same with changing on the fly with the plan, because we have Mini Coopers for a reason. This is why let's actually explain why They have chosen Mini Coopers, not just because it was part of the old movie, but because they have to be plausible to the actual plan that Mark Wahlberg is putting together. Okay, so the original plan A is to get the Mini Coopers and actually drive in the house, like into the mansion of Edward Norton's, his property, and kind of in and out, and they got to figure it out. So they have to do the training montages of going around corners and into corridors and hallways of a giant mansion, and then outside down the steps and all this other stuff. So they're training for a very small, agile, and quick vehicle. Right? Mm-hmm. Well, when they realize on the day that they're going to do the heist that there's like a party going on with one of the neighbors' mansions, they realize they can't do it and they gotta figure this out another day. Well, because they already have the cars and they've trained on the cars, they use that to their advantage in the traffic and then into the subway station and then getting onto the rails of the subway cars. And it just... there is a plausibility to this type of car, and makes sense. Like they get to use the skills that they were planning and learning prior in the movie, and I just thought it was awesome. Like the final 20 minutes of this movie is outstanding. Like I know we keep saying that the movie's like really good, you know what I mean? Like overall really good. But I would say the last like 20 minutes of this movie, the action is fantastic. Like we have Mini Coopers outrunning subway cars. We got a real helicopter going underneath a bridge and cutting Mark Wahlberg off while Ed Norton's sitting in it and playing a game of chicken with him. And I was just like on the edge of my seat for stuff like that. Like that shit rocks.
Yeah, I did read that like F. Gary Gray and cinematographer Wally Pfister, it says they were like working together to develop this like visual style, and like they were looking at chase sequences from The French Connection, Ronin, and Bourne Identity, and they're like, that's what we want to try and do. Well, I don't think they quite got there, right?
No.
Which again is probably a testament to F. Gary Gray not being John Frankenheimer, But that said, it still is a lot of really cool like practical car stuff here. And as you said, like for whatever I said about how I don't really love the Mini Cooper as like a real car, you're absolutely right in that on screen and in these kind of action sequences, they're really, really cool because they can do all the zooming in of small little places, and they kind of look neat together, like when they're in formation, And also it's like when, I don't know, like if you take like a huge like big car and have it go up against a helicopter, it doesn't seem as intimidating as like when Mark Wahlberg's in a little Mini Cooper and the helicopter's threatening him.
Exactly. I guess we're at the point where I got to ask you, does this deserve sequels? We like to ask that at the end of our discussions, and I think we're right around there. But did you want to see this crew come together for one last job, or maybe 3 or 4 more jobs? Like, what do you think about that?
This is one where I feel like we haven't had one of these in a while where I can unequivocally say like, yes, I actually wish that we had gotten the Brazilian job, Well, I don't wish that you and I had Brazilian jobs.
You can go get one right now, actually. It's not
I'm good actually. But no, I do think I do look at this one as like a missed opportunity because you had this like really likable crew in place. The sky was the limit. You are now freed of, even though this is not really a remake, still the fact is that now you are entirely free of any kind of like preconceived notions or any need to like feel any kind of fealty to the original film. You didn't even need to use the Mini Coopers again, although I'm sure they probably would have, but still it's just all you had to do now was make like cool heist movies. And I mean, if you could get like 2 Ocean's sequels, there's no reason this couldn't have had more sequels too. Again, This is not Ocean's 11, but it's the same wheelhouse, and there's no reason that we couldn't have watched this crew go on more adventures. So yeah, I'm kind of bummed about this one.
Completely agreed. This sequel idea was bounced around for multiple years after this came out. Always popping up on IMDb and then being taken off and then popping up again. So much so that in March of 2008, Jason Statham says, somebody should just erase it from IMDb and put it back on there when it's fully due and ready. It's one of those things that's just sitting around. There's also some producer that was saying there was actually just it was never really greenlit, and I think it's because, like what you said, it's a missed opportunity that they fucked up.
It's
really
hard because sometimes when you and I look at this kind of thing, it's kind of clear like what happened or what went wrong. And this one, there's really no one really ever says exactly why the sequel never happened.
No.
And all I can assume is that they kept overthinking it, right? There was just like probably every draft they're like, well, it's not quite there yet. There's something missing. And rather than just like, have some confidence and go with one of the screenplays they had, I'm guessing they just kind of like were kept being like, this one's got to be bigger and better. Oh, we need one more action set piece. And it just gets to a point where when you keep trying to evolve a screenplay too much, you ultimately like lose your window, and that's what happened with this. Is I think you got to a point where, well, now Charlize Theron is too big to come back and just be part of the crew, right? So like now her role probably needs to be expanded. Oh, so that requires another rewrite where we got to make her even bigger. And it's like, oh, but now Jason Statham's also a leading man. He's not just like the third lead anymore. So yeah, they just missed their shot, and that's too bad.
Yeah. Yep. And then franchises like Fast and the Furious have taken over. So it's kind of like, oh, fuck, they're doing everything we were going to do anyways.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's a bummer. This one, absolutely, I would have loved to see more of these.
I mean, who, and I didn't, this is just an idea that just came into my head. I never saw anyone talk about this, but who should have been the bad guy that they're trying to like steal from in the Brazilian Job? Michael Caine.
That would have been cool.
Yeah. I'm sure he would have done it. That would be awesome.
Yeah. That would have been cool.
Yeah.
Hire this man.
Yeah, come on.
I mean, that's really all I have for notes on this movie. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It ain't Ocean's 11, like I said, but it's better than probably Ocean's 12 and 13.
I agree with that.
So like I quite like this. There's a reason why this film has stood the test of time of 22 years. I was just happy to rediscover it. Almost like a brand new viewing too. I
think the reason it works so well as like a cable movie, even though that's not really a thing anymore, is that I think it's a movie you might never go out of your way to sit down and watch, but if it's on, you're gonna sit there and watch it.
Totally.
It's like that you're gonna get sucked into it like every time. So
no, this was a great one. It was a nice palate cleanser from Planet of the Apes.
I'll just say right now, I know we don't always like to give this away, but just for the purpose of this, I'll just admit right now, our next two Mark Wahlberg movies, Mile 22 and Spencer Confidential, I will say right now, I've not seen either of them. And I don't want to jinx it, but I kind of feel like this is probably going to be our high point of Mark WahlTURD and the Yucky Bunch. Yeah.
I would agree with that. Because again, we're going to talk about it in depth, but Mark Wahlberg's career in the 2020s and around is very different than where he was here.
I alluded to this in our last episode about how I said Mark Wahlberg's career is one of the ones that can be kind of tracked in like phases. And I think we might... I think a lot of us might be happier if he had stayed in this Italian Job phase, but I would say that's not what happened. And when we get into our next ones, we'll talk about instead the directions his career and his personal life, which factors into his career, goes. So
definitely.
Yeah.
And to do that, you got to follow us at F2F Pod. That's at F2, the number 2 F Pod on all the socials. Like us there, like us everywhere. Rate, review, whatever you do. A star rating would be great. And then just join the tribe and hit that subscribe. And let's talk more Mark WahlTURD and the Yucky Bunch. You know how... Well, I mean, you obviously know this, and the listeners know this too, but... Matrix,
Oh, yeah.
You know how we're living in it.
Your Matrix, your simulation theory, yes.
The simulation theory, and you know what? You're becoming more of a believer every single day.
I've noticed certain things recently. Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm a believer, but I think it's very fun for me to point out what I notice.
Yes, yeah. And I get texts every couple days, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's. I mean, I believe it. So there you go. Anyway, we planned these theme months, a long time ago, and then I realized that it's during Lent. Number one, and the king of Lent right now. One of the self-proclaimed prophets of Lent is Mark Wahlberg, which I thought was funny. Like you had sent me a screenshot with his little, his little Ash Wednesday on his forehead, So I thought that was funny that we didn't plan for that to make him a Lent, like full on, like this whole theme thing is like fully on during there. Also, well, you know this about me. I like my trash TV. Right?
Right. Yeah.
You don't really partake, right?
No, I try not to.
Okay. Well, me and my fiance Brittany, we you know this. We love trash TV. We love our Love Is Blinds. all of the franchises, by the way. We watch the Brazil one, we watch the UK one, the Sweden one. We watch it all. We love it. We will also watch this one called Love Never Lies. Have you heard of this?
No.
Okay. Well, Love Never Lies. It's a Netflix show, and there's like a Poland one, and then a Mexico one, I think, and then a South Africa one. We've seen them all, and they're like these couples come onto an island, obviously, and they're all super hot, and then the couples get pulled away to different villas, and then people come to like tempt them, right? And then they get, every couple episodes, they talk to something called I Detect, which is like a lie detector thing. So, and then the OG coupling gets to see the lies and the truth that they say, so they can grow from it and see if they stay together. Anyway, I've told friends of mine that I love this show, and they always say to me, that sounds like Temptation Island. And I was like, fuck, Temptation Island. My mom used to watch that. There was like a Fox incarnation, and I know it was on
I remember that was a big deal.
Yeah. So it was on USA the last couple of years. Well, anyway, this last week, Trev, Netflix came out with Temptation Island. Okay. They bought the rights. They aired it this week. We have been watching it. Do you know who this fucking host is of Temptation Island?
I think I do. It's the guy. He's got this. His name is also Mark Wahlberg, right?
It is.
Yeah. It's not our Mark Wahlberg.
No. It's Mark L. Wahlberg. Wahlberg spelt without the H. I know of him through a YouTuber like that, and of course through just reality TV history over the years, like Moment of Truth, and then of course the Temptation Island. He's been hosting this show for 20 years across like 9 seasons or something. Anyway, he's the host of the show. So not only are we doing Mark WahlTURD and the Yucky Bunch, I got a better Mark Wahlberg that I've been watching the last couple days. No.
Yeah, you get a double dose of Wahlberg, yeah.
I'll say this, though. This Mark Wahlberg guy, he's an incredible reality TV host. Like, he therapizes these people, and the way he does it, he's so genuine and so nice. He's like everybody's dad, especially now, because he's like probably, close to 50. But like, he's just great. So I will say, as of right now, the two Wahlbergs, he's the best Wahlberg.
Here's the important question. Do you think he would have been a better Captain Leo Davidson in Planet of the Apes?
You know what? I would believe his speeches. Yes. I have been believing his speeches.
I mean, Mark Wahlberg, Mark Wahlberg Prime is not trash TV, like ignorant himself. There's Wahlburgers. So.
There's Wahlburgers. This Mark L. Wahlberg. Did you know he was the host and narrator of Antiques Roadshow for 20 years?
Ooh, that's a show I actually did used to watch.
Yeah.
That's probably why I remember that guy.
Dude, 252 episodes.
Yeah,
that's where you make the money.
yeah. Forget those Italian Job sequels.
Yeah. Let's get actual Mark Wahlberg Prime to go reinvent the Antique Roadshow.
Yeah, it's either that or keep going with his like prayer app now. So,
yeah, we'll get to that.